Heart of Europe's British Parliamentary track of 2013. And this will be a lecture about how to judge British parliamentary debate. Just the outline there, it says all the basic things that need to be addressed. It's based on what's written in the rules mostly, so that most important points are made clear, because obviously there may be some slight differences between different national or regional variations of the rules, so or the exact procedure in which certain things are done. So I hope I will make clear the specifics of how we intend to have this tournament judged. So there are well, the most important thing right at the beginning of the debate. If you've judged anything, anywhere, any format, I think it's clear that nobody wants the debate to be about definitions. Everybody wants just do the definitions right the first time and then move on to what's important. However, as you all definitely know, it doesn't happen always. So sometimes the definition that is provided by the first speaker is, in the terms of our rules, or how it's usually being called in this format, it's unreasonable. And that's important because if a definition is unreasonable, then technically it may be challenged by everyone at every turn if it remains to be unreasonable through the attempts of the further speakers to make it reasonable. What makes a motion reasonable, of course, we do not allow squirrels, so-called squirrels, which means that it should be about what a normal, average, reasonable person would consider the motion to be about, or what it's supposed to be about. No, truisms, of course, definition needs to be by something else than what is being defined, and it doesn't, and it must not be circular, meaning that it sort of flows from itself to define itself, and so on in loops. Then one specific thing, we want it to be about the present situation. So if there is a present element or like realistic element to the motion, then the definition should not arbitrarily choose some long gone period in history or specify it into some hypothetical future, obviously. So it needs to stick to the present as much as that is reasonable in the context of what the motion is, which usually this means that just we're talking about the real world and we're talking about here and now in the real world, status quo. Then it, of course, needs to allow the debate. The definition cannot be such that a debate is impossible if the definition is held by the opposition. And of course, no reasonable opposition would accept an unfair definition that makes their job impossible. So if all these criteria are met, then most likely what we're dealing with is a reasonable definition. Usually, in the situation where the definitions have to be challenged, then hopefully it will end with the first speaker, or begin and end, with the first speaker, or first member of the opposition, leader of the opposition. He is the one that needs to challenge the definition and, most importantly, also offer the reasonable alternative. If he just challenges it and offers nothing, then the challenge has not been done right, and probably it will keep being bad for the opposing team. So hopefully the leader of the opposition, in the situation where the definition would be unreasonable, will offer a reasonable alternative which will be accepted, and then the debate will finally start for real. However, as I've said at the beginning, if that does not happen, if the offered alternative is still unreasonable, then even the first speaker of the next team has the right to challenge it. And even if that is unreasonable for some reason, then even the first speaker, always the first speaker of the team, even the first speaker of the last team needs to challenge the definition, and even may split from the general direction of the first government. So like the second government, for instance, had something completely unreasonable which wasn't rectified, then still may that team may still come up with their own hopefully reasonable version. So what it really boils down to, the definitions at some point have to become reasonable for the debate, or no debate happens at all really, and that would be quite sad. So I think that this issue is quite clear, and hopefully the debaters will do it well most of the time. Then, of course, the most important thing probably about what the teams are talking about is the content of what they're talking about. They need to talk about something which is relevant, logical, consistent, and persuasive. Which I realize it's still a quite vague explanation, but that's the point why it makes sense to have panels of judges, because even if all the judges do follow the procedure exactly, they still may arrive at different conclusions, because they will still be assessing it in a way that something may seem more logical to one person than to another. So the point is not there is no single magic bullet solution to how to decide what content is good, but what's most important, I think, is that, as is written there, all the speakers must bring positive matter except for the very last two, and all need to do some sort of reaction or rebuttal, ideally, except for the very first one, because he has no one to rebut. So that's, I think that's technically, from the standpoint of the rules of this particular format, I think that the technicality that everybody needs to bring positive matter and everybody needs to rebut, if at all possible, then that's really what you need to focus at as judges. Of course, while following these criteria for assessing which matter is good matter. And matter. We have adopted rules from World Schools tournaments in Germany, and we especially like the way they phrased the words. It must have been some sort of a forgotten poet, because they reinvented the classical content style and strategy to matter and manner, and then they focused, when they explained what particular things need to be there, they called elements. So at one point there were elements of matter. So it sounded quite nice, so that's why we kept it, but I still put in brackets, what's usually called. So it's absolutely clear. Manner is style, or in Karl Popper it would be explained as formal elements. It means all these things that are there: eye contact, voice modulation, hand gestures, language and accent, use of notes. Here, there is only one rule that basically needs to be followed when assessing how much the manner is done well by the speaker, and that's one simple thing, really. It should not hinder his speech. It should accentuate the important points. It should make his message clearer. So even though we do not dislike foreign accents, because we are basically all foreign each other, and as we discussed before the lecture, there are really significant differences between languages and even like spelling of vowels and stuff. And that's all well and good, unless it makes it virtually impossible to understand the speaker. So just like speaking too fast or too slow, or or in a monotony, or in using gestures that are illogical, all these things diminish the message. So all of them are bad, and equally so if even the accent is such that you cannot understand what the person is saying. Even then, it also becomes a bad thing. So basically, if you understand the speaker well, then there is probably no fundamental problem with this matter. And in this particular format, it's not really a major component of the overall assessing or even giving them points. So just do not persecute people who have foreign accents, and more than that, it's quite obvious. Then a structure or a strategy. It is the elements that are not really a content by itself, but which give the speech certain structure and usually has to do with timing. And in this format, in this particular version of the British Parliamentary debate format, we wish them to focus on what's most important and spend the most time with what's most important. It happened to me while I participated at a Czech tournament in BP at my alma mater in Masaryk University in Brno, that they had a particular variation of the rules whereby they required, especially the first member of each side, to deal with every single point, however minute. And that was for the judges, that was the priority in their assessment, like that's what needed to be done. And if it wasn't, then by one team, then it didn't really matter how well they did tackle the arguments that they spent the most time with. So that was secondary in that version. In this version, we want to make it clear that it is primary to deal with what's most important, and it is not necessary to deal with every single point. I'm not sure, like, if it was the case in any of the tournaments in any of the areas that you've been to. I personally hope it wasn't, because I really disagree with that particular variation. But here, I just really want to make it clear, the strategy is good when they deal with what they need to deal with, which once again is subjective to assess to a point what's the most important thing. But really, they shouldn't be dealing their time, spending their time on irrelevancies. And there is also an element of consistency between the members. So both in terms of matter, like what they are talking about, but also in the overall strategy chosen, the team should be consistent as such, and that's a good thing. And if they are inconsistent, that's obviously a bad thing. So that's another element that is a part of strategy, structure. But really the differentiation in this format between manner and matter and structure is not that important, because there are no separate points assessed or given to in these different areas and then combined as the overall mark. Like in the ballot, you have just a place for grading them, and from the grade it sort of results the range of the points that you can use, and that's just a single number. So if you're making the assessment, make a holistic assessment that takes into account all the three different elements of what they're supposed to do. So they need to be well understood, they need to speak about things that matter, and they need to deal with things that are important from the viewpoint of what makes it more likely that they will successfully attack the opponent, or what makes it more likely for them to win the clashes. So that's what they need to focus on, and sometimes it happens with really smart and well-prepared debaters that they bring a lot of matter that is very intelligent and educated and makes a lot of sense sort of by itself. It's like it's a good quote or a good proof, but in this case it may be completely irrelevant if it just doesn't clash or address the most important points of the opponent. Then there's just once again one formal thing that needs to be upheld by everyone, and there is some room for interpretation. Everybody needs to start with an introduction, and there are no specific details what consists or what the introduction must consist of. But they sort of should start at the beginning. They can introduce themselves, or they can start by explaining what they will be talking about in their speech, something that works as framing, because they also need to end the speech with some sort of ending. So in one word, I think it's framing. They need to frame their speech, and then in between they need to bring all the matter and address all strategic points and do it in an understandable way, all the things that I've talked before. But it needs also, it's important to say, it needs to be framed at the beginning and at the end. If it is not, then it is a thing that you can reflect in the points that you give to the speakers or the team as a whole. Okay? This, I think, is technically very important. it's what sort of ranges of points you wish to give the speakers if they are at that appropriate level of quality in your assessment. It's basically like in school, and we don't have grade F, if you notice. So nobody will fail, nobody will get less than 50 points. But at least I've been recently to a World Schools Debate Academy about World Schools format, and there was a lecture by G. Riddian Morgan who explained that, and he didn't like it himself, that even in World Schools there is the minimal range limit, but there was also a maximal limit. So you had 100 points total, and you could give maximum of like 75 or 80. I think it was 80. So, and it wasn't even 50, the lowest. It was like from 60 to 80. You can give points only from 60 to 80, because if it's too low, then it would be demotivating, and if it's too high, then I don't know, they will think too much of themselves, or there was some sort of logic like that involved. So, in this case, you can make them feel that they're really good. You can give them close to full amount of points if they're excellent and flawless. If they are average, it should be around 70 points. So between 70 and 79. So I expect that most of the marks you should give should be in the average range, because of course there will be unique individuals who will do excellent job, and there will be some probably that will not be very good, probably beginners or something like that. But if say we make a statistical average of all the marks at the end of the tournament, and they are all in the range of 90 to 100, then probably that was the average level of the tournament, therefore it should have been 70 to 79. So I think there's also the element of assessment or giving points, element of comparing the speakers, so that after first few speeches you make a sort of a general picture about what the level of the tournament is, and then what is like the average at the tournament to be marked by the average of the points. Because you can of course explain the different ranges by something vague like so the speaker has strengths and weaknesses and roughly equal proportions, but I guess you can say that every single time, so there is no exact way to define what an average is, except for the mathematical one, which is that which is the average level of quality between the people, as you can see it. Right. And don't worry, the points, the individual points, the ranges will be included in the ballot. So right where you need to give the grade, you will see the ranges, and you can easily decide quickly. Then there are the adjudicator duties. That's the formal aspect of the rules of the tournament, which is like external to the debates themselves, but this all still needs to be done. And there's just like it will be clear, team rankings. Rankings is the order in which they placed in the debate from the first to the fourth. Grades, that's the stuff. That's the thing to make it a tool to make it easier for yourself to decide which what amount of points you should give them. So it's like a generalization of one of the skill levels from the 5. So A through E, and that's probably something you want to do before you're thinking about specific points. So first, it's like a shortcut. You can grade it, and then you know, resulting from the grade, which range is applicable. So that's the easiest way mathematically to make sense of how much points you want to give them. If you think mathematically in a different way and some other procedure is more suitable to you, the grades can be superfluous to you, not really necessary. But the most important thing is the speaker marks, which is the individual points. That definitely needs to be given, and it may be a necessary thing to be able to decide ultimately the placement of all teams in the tournament, because it's reasonable to expect that sometimes they will have the same amount of placements or something like that, even though it may not happen, but still the individual points, accurately given individual points, are important so that we can make sense of the results then. From these things, there's a difference from some tournaments, and I'm not sure how it worked on the tournaments of British Parliamentary format that you were at, In the rules that we use, you are supposed to talk about the result before you give it with the other judges in the panel. And the goal ultimately is to reach a unanimous decision. If that does not happen, you are supposed to make a majority vote. And if you cannot agree even by these means, then the chair has an ultimate override on what the result should be, the chair of the panel. So hopefully there will always be a panel of 3, and hopefully it will not come to a chair override. But you know, you never know how complicated the particular debate will be. And the thing is that what you're supposed to decide collectively is the ranking, so that the result is a single ranking. That's the final result of the debate. Of course, each of you can individually give them any amount of points that you feel like it. It should probably correspond with how you would consider, what you would consider the appropriate ranking to be for them. So, of course, it wouldn't make sense to give them give one team the least amount of points and then put them on the first place in the debate. So generally, if you wish them to be in a particular ranking, then you need to have the points reflecting the order of how good the teams were. Then the chair typically is the one who provides the verbal feedback, which should not exceed 10 minutes, so that we do not prolong the tournament longer than necessary. It's important that the verbal feedback is useful to the debaters and is not completely demotivational to them. So you should obviously give them something that can work as advice for them to improve in the future debates. You hopefully shouldn't do it in such a way that would completely demoralize them, and so that they would decide that they should never debate again. So that's one thing. You can after this happens, you can give them some feedback individually, each of the judges, if especially they ask for it. But there is a clause that they are not allowed to harass you for it. So I suppose if you really don't feel like giving them individual comments, then you have an escape clause in the rules to do so. But ideally, I hope that it can work out between the judges and the debaters, and they will obviously expect to get some feedback potentially from each of you, and it will be best if you provide them, unless you would intend to spend like hours on it and then completely block the proceedings. Then is a complete documentation bit. Of course, that means the ballots. You need to fill the ballots, and also that's what you're supposed to do ideally before you give the feedback, so that they can already be collected by our telling crew before you even finish the verbal feedback. So that's the best order for the things to happen. And I believe that's the procedure mostly, and there will be space for questions after this whole lecture, so we can, I think, discuss the particular details that may have been overlooked or are not clear to you, because of course it's best to be clear about the procedure, once again, so that the tournament doesn't get completely blocked. Then there are some things you are not allowed to do, or strictly forbidden to do. It's most importantly the rule that you should not interrupt the debate. You should just ask the speakers, or the chairperson should ask the speaker who is supposed to speak to go speak, and then once that starts, of course the chair is ultimately responsible for measuring of the time if there is not a timekeeper available. So the time needs to be measured, and it is 7 minutes. And in this particular version, it should be, there is the protected first and last minute of those 7 minutes, during which no points of information can happen. And also when they are over the time limit, In our case, you can stop them when they are 10 seconds over the 7 minutes. I know that somewhere it's 30 seconds. So in the case of autonomous, it's 10 seconds. They are not supposed to continue speaking after time's up. Of course, there are standard signals that you should give them the first and the last minute so that they know, and probably 30 seconds before the end, so that they also know that that is approaching. There's obviously in this format no preparation time in between the speeches, so it's up to the chair how quickly he will call the next speaker. Ideally, it should be right away or approaching right away. Then there is also one thing related to the points of information. That's one exception to the no interruption rule, and that's, well, one of the two, but hopefully the only one that will actually be happening is, well, hopefully it still should not be happening, but let's get to the point. It's when one team notices a weakness in the speaker that's currently speaking, and they will try to harass him with points of information, to the point that, you know, the chain points of information, when they are all constantly having points of information and trying to completely block the speech. When you notice that, and they really will not be willing to let the speaker continue on, because the length of the point of information should not exceed 15 seconds, and the frequency should be about, you know, during a speech everybody should offer a point of information, all the speakers, and ideally about twice, or have during the whole course of the debate to have at least 2 points of information answered each individual speaker or given. So that's like the normal frequency would be somewhere in that range. If it's really like one after each other, like 2-3 times in a single attempt to attack, then that probably is harassing, and the chair can like say to them that they should stop doing that. And that should probably not also completely derail the debate. It should still continue right on, just we can make it clear to them that they should stop attacking with points of information excessively. And then the other reason, obviously, is if some teams started, or some speakers started to threaten with physical violence and stuff, then obviously, hopefully that will not happen in this tournament. But once again, it's better to be safe than sorry. In that situation, if it should arise, then the chair should probably act very vigorously, so that any uprisings are quelled before they completely break out. Then that's the only really things that you should be fighting actively. But it's not all about what you can't do in the sense of fighting something you don't like. It's also like trying to help someone that you should not be doing at all. Mostly because it's really unfair to the other team every time you do something like that, and some judges do have a tendency to do that, however slightly or briefly. It can be even barely conscious, or it can be barely, or it can still be sort of subliminal when you are using your gestures, your mimicry, or using your face or something to give them some clues as to if you like what you're hearing, or if you don't like what you're hearing, or trying to encourage them and something. That is something that's probably quite common among the judges, but still you should probably not be doing even that. So try to be sphinxes, so that you are absolutely fair and you don't interfere with the speech. Then there is the thing about bias and opinions. I'm quite confident that many of you are very educated people, or smart people, or people with a lot of knowledge, and that should not be something that you bring into the debate. When you come into the debate, you are supposed to assess the logic and the strategy and stuff, but you're not supposed to bring your own things that you know and make them into things that you think they really said. So it's most dangerous in the case of factual motions, when you try to debate something that involves the need for a lot of evidence or expert knowledge. Then you can judge it from your point of view, which is more maybe expert level understanding of the situation, but you really should work or should decide based on what they said, what they actually said. So that also may not be intentional. You may do that and be not aware of that. So it's not something like punishable by death, but the thing is you should try consciously to avoid that when you're assessing the matter, especially that has been presented. And then personal bias, that would be more like not really liking a particular person that is speaking. It's obviously shouldn't bring any animosity, or even perhaps liking someone into how you decide what they really said. Once again, we're just human beings, it may happen, but ideally you should decide about each performance objectively, meaning that no personal feelings as well as personal expert knowledge are involved in that. And hopefully when you do all that in the way in which it's supposed to be done, then all the judging will be of high quality and fair, and we can all be happy, including debaters, but obviously debaters that will have a lot of losses will probably still think that some judges were biased against them, but once again, it's in the rules that they cannot harass you, so you have a defense against that as well. But I think I don't have to say that the ultimate goal is that we all stay civil and friendly and deal with the problems constructively, so that no hard feelings happen after the tournament. Okay, that's really everything that I felt like it needed to be said. Is there something you want to ask or add? Yes, sure.
Yeah, maybe about not having any knowledge, so to say, as a judge. I thought you have to judge, or that you can expect the judges to be like fairly educated,
sure.
Western European, Central European, or North American, I don't know, people who read newspapers and know some things to some extent. So you don't have to explain everything, but I thought...
The thing is, you can then use that in the feedback, like enlighten them on
yeah, but if they're saying something that you know is not true and you believe that everyone knows that's not true?
Of course, of course. If one of the teams is completely flat out lying, then you should certainly reflect that in the amount of points you give them. But if the opponent does not deal with that, does not notice that to be incorrect, and does not even suspect that, and does not do anything strategically to minimize the damage that point may cause, if they still lose, even if you don't think about that particular point, then it's not something that should primarily decide the debate. Something that you know, but that didn't happen, wasn't said or understood in the debate by the debaters. I know it's a situation that no judge really wants to do, letting the team win, or the one of the teams win that you think used some sort of tactics, or used or was late in their preparation, and something that you do not approve of. But you need to follow the elements that are primary in the first place. Then something that you personally do not approve of, but still probably wasn't dealt with the team that lost, and something that you should tell them definitely, so that hopefully not even the team that won will repeat it in the future. Because you of course want them to win on the basis of them being good, not on the basis of using questionable facts or questionable tactics. But once again, there's no easy answers really. Just it's also sometimes a thin line to walk. But ideally, unless the debaters deal with it themselves, you shouldn't substantially help them in the decision just because you knew it wasn't 100% correct for the other team to use that technique.
So in Canada, and when I've gone to England to do this style as well, we always talk about role fulfillment, and I noticed it wasn't in this.
About what?
Role fulfillment.
Oh.
And it wasn't in the guide that you sent me or in this guide. So I just thought, as judges, maybe we're on the same page. Like when I've ever judged, the first thing as a judge that we look at is, did they fulfill their role? Is that the same?
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially.
Essentially, it was addressed, what you call the roles of the speakers. It was addressed in that clause of the rules that dealt with that it needs to have framing and it needs to have constructive and rebuttal elements. Yeah, so anything else?
Also, just really quickly, how many POIs are we expecting the debaters to take during their speeches?
Oh, as I said, everybody is supposed to make some.
Right, deliver at least
but how
2
many should
POIs.
And well, at least accept
Two.
it.
I would say
Two should
one.
be.
3 is better, but I won't prefer voice.
Yeah, it's like if everybody tries and everybody is accepted, then that's probably ideal.
Okay.
Even though, of course, there can be variations. Sometimes it could be 2 for 1, and
What?
No, we said 2 for 1.
Oh, sorry.
this is it's slightly confusing. Yes. So yeah, it's like everybody. What's wrong is when somebody doesn't offer, or when the speaker does not accept. And the third scenario that I was talking about, the harassment, when it's excessive, obviously. So that's the only 3 situations that should be penalized in the bunch. Anything else?
It was a clear presentation.
What?
It was a good presentation.
Oh, thank you very much for saying that on the record. Okay, I think let's feast. Officially, the Clarice presentation is over. Thank you.